Hey guys, Garrett here, and today I want to tell you a little more about my home build project, specifically a bunch of the mistakes that I made. Now, I'm not too proud to say I made mistakes. I made a lot of them, but I learned along the way. And most of my mistakes were just a lack of experience. As a first-time home builder, you can only be so prepared going into it. You can think of a million different things, but trust me, you are forgetting a whole lot of them as well. So this video is for you guys so that you don't repeat the same mistakes that I made. Whenever I would be remodeling one of my other properties, say an income property or something like that, I've learned over time that I can get pretty darn accurate when it comes to material quantities and that sort of stuff. I tried to apply the exact same principle to my home build to try to hit a lot of things just dead on, and it was a huge mistake. It seemed like I just never had enough lumber on site. And lumber is kind of a catch-22. If it's green lumber, treated lumber, you don't want too much of it on site for too long because it's going to warp and it's going to twist. But non-treated lumber, you have a little more wiggle room with it, so it can sit a little bit longer, especially if it's sitting outside of the sun. So again, when I was building my house, I was being way too accurate with everything, and I would forget about the things like bracing between truss members or that sort of stuff, or whether it be permanent or temporary bracing. I didn't even account for any of it. So when it comes to lumber especially, have plenty of it on site. Don't get too caught up in getting rid of your waste either. You're gonna end up using quite a bit in, I don't know, just a bunch of random places, whether it be like a 2x4 that's only a foot long. I was building ICF and man, I used about every single one of those that I could find on site just to tie like weak spots together within the ICF. Outside of lumber, I did quite a bit better, but I would still have to make constant store runs, it seemed like. And that's the one thing too. I would suggest getting more than you need of about everything that you're going to be using on your home build project. You're going to be visiting the lumber store just constantly. So if you have too much of something or you're done with this project and you have some things left over, you're going to be at the store anyway. So you can just take it back at that point and then buy the next stuff that you need. Speaking of store runs, I had no idea I was going to be running to the store so many times and just how exhausting and time consuming it is. Before you go to the store, you have to figure out what are your quantities going to be, what is it that I'm actually picking up, who's got it on sale, or where am I going to be picking this up. Then you have to actually load up your truck and your trailer or whatever it is, go to the store, pick the stuff up, physically load it generally yourself, take it back to the job site, unload it, and then you can finally get back to work. And by the time you can finally get back to work, you've spent almost the entire day doing that run. So you've lost a bunch of time and energy and you're just exhausted. So most of the time I would quit after that and get started again the next day. So it's time consuming. The good thing about going to the store all the time is you probably know the store better than any of the workers there. You can go straight to whatever it is that you need. It's always there and you can grab it. So as time goes on, you do get a little bit more efficient with it, but it's still time consuming and it's exhausting. And speaking of exhausting, the whole build project is just exhausting. And you're never going to build in enough rest days. And you're always going to be stressing with yourself that pull between I should be at the job site versus I am just too darn tired, I need to rest. And you're going to probably stress about it all day long. It's okay to let that go. I had trouble with that and most of the time I would just get mad at myself. But I'm here to tell you, build in some rest days. Also, remember that the things that you're going to use, the tools, the material, all that kind of stuff are generally pretty heavy and you're going to be using them repetitively. So for example, nail guns, screw guns, saws, things like that. They're heavy and you're going to be slinging thousands and thousands of nails whenever you're doing this. And if you're right-handed just like I am, your wrist and your forearm are going to just burn and ache and hurt all the time. If you can, try to go lefty if you are a righty. I'm terrible with my left arm, but I got a little better over time, and it was really out of necessity. My right arm would just about completely shut down, so I'd have to move to the left. Like I said before, I built an ICF house, and I obviously had some problems with it because I had never worked with that material before. I've outlined most of those in some of my other videos, but just a quick insight. I had some inadequate bracing. I made my own bracing. Wouldn't recommend that, just get the professional stuff. I didn't put any draft stop between the top plate and the top of the wall where the roof actually attaches, and I get quite a bit of thermal loss from that. And one thing I didn't talk about in those other videos was I overestimated by probably 10% how much material I needed as far as the blocks went. I probably had about 10% left over. And when you're talking $26,000 worth of ICF products, that's a lot of money left over. So once I was done with the ICF, I ended up just putting it in a corner in my shop, just storing it away, thinking, oh, maybe I'll build another ICF home someday. But let's be honest, I built this house, I'm one and done. I think that's gonna be it, especially when it comes to home, because hey, this is our forever home. So with that said, I stashed it away, and finally, earlier this year, I decided, hey, why not try to put it on Facebook Marketplace? And I thought, gosh, who the heck is gonna want ICF blocks? Well, apparently a bunch of people want it. I sold them within an hour of putting them on for about 45% of what I initially spent on it. Just whatever materials you do have back that you can't take back, consider Craigslist or Facebook Marketplace or eBay or something like that. You can most likely get some of your money back. Another mistake that I made was going per plan on my windows and not thinking for myself. I thought, and this was because at our old property we would open the windows all the time. I thought that we needed lots of ventilation and that sort of stuff, rather than just say the minimum required by code. In a normal house, that would be just fine. However, when it comes to an ICF house, the temperature is just so constant all the time that if you open your windows, you're gonna throw off your humidity balance within your house pretty drastically, pretty quickly. So we hardly ever open our windows. And because of that, we've actually changed 4 of the windows out for big, nice picture windows. We initially put these windows in that have the grid inside of them that makes the cross pattern. Well, the more I looked at those, the more I felt like I was in a prison rather than in my own house. So it was nice. Once we switched those out for picture windows, you could actually see out of it. And our backyard faces towards nice trees and a pond and all that kind of stuff. And before, a lot of it was being blocked by the style of the window that I had in there. So consider putting picture windows in at least somewhere. I also forgot to spray foam around the windows on the outside of the house. Again, I built an ICF home, and I learned that between the window buck and the concrete, there's actually a little gap there because the concrete shrinks as it cures. And so I put the windows in with the flashing tape as well as the trim, and I got everything painted and caulked and all of that kind of stuff. And I could tell that there was quite a bit of I don't know if it's a draft, but like a thermal current going through the walls. So I ended up having to go strip all that trim off, strip all of that flashing tape off, and then spray foam around each window and then put it all back again. Again, more experience, and I wouldn't have made those mistakes, but these are things that you can avoid. The next mistake had to do with the footings within my basement floor. My home plan originally called for point loads in certain areas that would have a steel column going up and steel beams going across. Well, I thought that's how I was going to be building it. So when I dug the footings for my house, I did it per plan. Now you may think, where's the mistake in that? Well, the problem was, then I got a hold of my truss manufacturer. My truss manufacturer suggested a different way of doing it. Rather than having some point loads, we could just make some interior walls that were already going to be there, load bearing and just put a footing underneath those walls, then I don't have to have any steel beams, I-beams, anything like that within my house. So my helper and I had already spent about 3 days digging these footings per plan, only to have to change a bunch of them. So some of them we had to fill back in, but a lot of them we just had to enlarge. So if I would have known this up front, before I ever even broke ground, I would have gotten a hold of my truss manufacturer to figure out what's the truss layout going to be, where are the footings going to be. And then whenever I had the mini excavator down in the hole digging my footings, I would have dug these as well. I would have saved myself probably a week worth of work had I known that. Another mistake I made was pouring the basement slab myself. Now I would say that most people could do their own footings and that sort of stuff themselves, but unless they have extensive concrete experience, I would not do any flat work yourself. I got a quote from my concrete guy, but I wanted to save the $4,000 of labor that it was going to cost, and I thought, oh, this can't be that terribly hard. What a friggin' bonehead I am. That is exhausting, and it was a 3,000 square foot pour that we were doing, and I thought, yeah, me and 4 or 5 other guys, we can do it since we have no experience at all. So needless to say, there is concrete in my basement. It is there, it is hard, and it is fine. It is covered by carpet, and that's probably a good thing. It is not pretty at all. Hindsight 2020, I definitely would have hired that out. It was way too exhausting. The day that I was doing it was much warmer than it was supposed to be. It was winter and it was darn near 80 degrees. So things were setting up far faster than I thought they were going to. Plus I had trouble getting a consistent thickness all the way through. I had set rebar all over the place to set my level, and on top of that rebar would sit this little cradle that would then hold a pipe on top of it. I used just a galvanized pipe to sit on top of it so that I could screed. Well, that worked great, except that the pipe would float. Didn't know that. So then someone's got their foot on top of each pipe and inevitably would end up pushing down those level stakes that I'd have. And so I'd end up with, instead of a 4-inch slab, I'd end up with 3.5 inches, something like that. Anyway, the concrete is down, it's there. I'm not going to take it back up, but again, any flat work that you have, hire it out. Speaking of concrete, the concrete pour days were probably the most stressful days of my entire life. I was always up against weather coming in. Most of the concrete pours that I was doing was in the winter, and so I was trying to wait for days that weren't snowing or raining or too windy or mainly just too cold, because you don't want to pour on super duper cold days. So I was always against the clock whenever it came to concrete pour days, and I was rushing and rushing and rushing. So I'd set the concrete pour day, and then we would scramble to make it. And the concrete pour day would be here, and we are still scrambling to get everything done. And we always got the concrete poured, but there's a whole lot of stress that could have been taken away if I would have given myself a little more time, or if it wasn't winter and we were always against the clock or the temperature. But one of the days I didn't take the time to accurately figure out how much concrete I was going to need. So I was an entire truck short, and this was on a footing pour. So thankfully the concrete people went ahead and got a truck out there ASAP. We were able to get the whole thing poured, but take the time on the important stuff, especially quantities when it comes to concrete. You don't want to be short. Even with that full truck, we were just a little bit short, so I had to race to the store, get about 20 bags of concrete, and then we had to quick mix them and put them in to finish that pour. It's funny, I talk about concrete kind of negatively, but at this point, if I was to do, say, a 10-foot by 20-foot slab or something like that, I could do one pretty darn nice at this point. I've got enough experience with it, but to think that, like with the basement port, that I could do 3,000 square feet, that was just ignorant. One of the things that I absolutely got right was I hired out the sheetrock as well as all the mudding, taping, and the texturing, and even the painting of the ceilings. My gosh, those guys, it's an art form and they are so fast. Like in my basement, it was 2,400 square feet of finished space and they hung that sheetrock in one day. 4 guys did that in one day. I don't know how anyone could do it. It would have taken me probably 2 months to do that. Hire that out. That's just an absolute no-brainer. And to do that work, say just in that basement area, costs $9,200. Money well spent. And then there are little things along the job site that you're going to want. You're going to want just a ton of tape measures around and hammers, because it's inevitable that they get broken or they get lost or they get rusty or they just quit working. You need a bunch of them around, as well as pencils. You're going to lose them constantly, so keep a constant supply of pencils. Shoes, that's another big one. You're going to need a ton of shoes whenever you're doing this. It's amazing. I probably went through 8 pair of shoes doing it, and that ranged from boots that had steel toes in them to just tennis shoes. And it really depended upon the season to what I would wear. Whenever I was doing basement stuff and I didn't have the concrete down or I wasn't working inside, it was always boots. And that's because you're usually slogging around in the mud. But as you get inside, tennis shoes will do just fine. I know there's going to be some people out there who say, you need steel-toed boots. Well, steel-toed boots are heavy, they wear you out, and it's your own job site. So just take your time, pick a footwear that works for you, and you'll be just fine. Outside of footwear, clothes, same thing. You're going to go through a ton of them. Go to Goodwill, get some used ones that you're fine getting yuck on, and then you can just throw them away later. But you're going to go through tons of shirts and jeans. You're going to catch them on nails and stuff and rip holes in them, or you're going to squat down and the crotch just comes ripping apart. It happens. Make sure you also have a pretty nice tool belt. For me, I wouldn't have been able to do this project without that tool belt. I had so many things within it, and it was always just right there within reach. Definitely get one of those. I'm sure there's a million other little things that I could tell you, but this covers the basics. This covers the major things, the major mistakes that I made along my journey. Good luck with your project. It's hard, it's tough, and I wish you well with it. I know you'll get there. It just takes time. You just got to keep putting in the time. Eventually you get there. You got to break it down into little pieces. And again, you'll get there. Thank you guys for watching. For more great content like this, make sure you hit the like button as well as subscribe to this channel. I'll see you next time.